The World Trade Body was established on the 1st of January back in 1995. It was the biggest reform in international trade since the end of the Second World War. And ever since its inception, the World Body has presided over international trade, ensuring that it proceeds with a semblance of order. But in its 25th year of existence, confidence in the global body has sunk to an unprecedented low. But just a few weeks ago, the WTO lost its power to resolve trade disputes. This was after the United States blocked the functioning of the appellate body, which is the WTO's highest adjudicating body. Today in In-Depth, we look into why such a situation has come to pass, the importance of the World Trade Organization, and the loss of confidence in this global body. So the World Trade Organization has completed 25 years of its existence. The World Trade Body was established on the 1st of January 1995 after 8 years of Uruguay round of trade negotiations. Its creation marked the biggest reform of international trade since the end of the Second World War. In less than 25 years of existence, the WTO has produced close to 156 rulings involving a host of issues like taxes on alcoholic beverages, subsidies given for civilian aircraft production, importation of solar cells, anti-dumping duties on shrimps, packaging regulations for cigarettes, regulation of gambling services, and measures affecting imports of beef. On several occasions, the WTO has passed judgments against powerful developed countries like the United States. Both in terms of sheer volume of cases and the wealth of jurisprudence produced, the appellate body of the WTO has outperformed most international courts and international tribunals over the years.
WTO is a main regulatory body which guides trade in almost all the economies. Otherwise, there was no structural reform in the trade negotiations throughout the world. After the WTO, there are a lot of developments like the advent of FTAs. Now the economies are able to sign FTAs and the multilateral agreements also. And on the basis of the bilateral agreements, the few economies are growing fast. Though there are some issues in the free trade agreements also, but overall, the free trade agreements are very, very successful for the growth of the economies. And I believe going forward, with the more and more developments at the domestic level, like countries should also reform their domestic trade facilitation measures, and WTO is a good regulatory body to handle all these issues.
However, on its 25th anniversary, confidence in the global body has plummeted to a historical low. A few weeks ago, a vital arm of the WTO for resolving trade disputes was clipped. The United States of America blocked the functioning of the appellate body, which is the highest adjudicating body for resolving global trade disputes. Washington has repeatedly criticized the functioning of the adjudicating body for allegedly straying away from the dispute settlement understanding. The appellate body going into slumber is a serious setback for the rules-based multilateral trading order. The most immediate implication would be that if any WTO panel report were appealed, it would go into a void, as the body does not have the minimum number of members required to hear the case. And this would then allow a country to block the adoption of the report if it loses a trade dispute, and thus not comply with the WTO panel decision. The World Trade Organization, remember, is the only global international organization that deals with the rules of trade between countries. At its heart are WTO agreements negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading countries and ratified in their parliaments as well. The goal is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly, predictably, and of course freely as possible.
With 164 member countries, the purpose of World Trade Organization is to promote international commerce. Established in 1995, the WTO is based in Geneva in Switzerland. It is the successor to the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or the GATT, a group founded in 1948 whose rules created the modern multilateral trading system. The primary objective of WTO is to help free and predictable flow of trade. It does this by administrating trade agreements, acting as a forum for trade negotiations, settling trade disputes, reviewing national trade policies, building trade capacity of developing economies, cooperating with other international organizations.
So on the 1st of January 1948, the precursor of the WTO, the GATT, came into force. And there were 23 countries which were the founding nations, including India. And GATT was mainly concentrated on merchandise goods trade, that too excluding agriculture. So, and then there were other things which had changed in the global economy between 1948 and 94. For instance, agricultural trade became important. Services trade came up as a new thing. And people also felt that there were issues about intellectual property rights and about their protection. There were other things which the developing countries were raising. For instance, the quotas on textiles and clothing, which were a derogation from the GATT principles. So all these things were put together, and they were part of the agreements which were negotiated between 1986 and 94, and the WTO came into being on the 1st of January 1995.
WTO's 164 members account for 98% of the world trade. 22 countries have the negotiating membership. The WTO is run by its member governments, and all major decisions are made by the Ministerial Conference that meets roughly every 2 years. A General Council conducts the organization's business at intervals between ministerial conferences. Since the inaugural conference in Singapore in 1996, there have been 11 such meetings. The 12th is scheduled to take place in June 2020 in Kazakhstan.
After the establishment of WTO, there is a lot of progress in the trade negotiations, and trade is in the higher trajectory, though there are slowdowns and sometimes the headwinds because of the various developments in the global economy. But overall, WTO is a very successful body to settle the trade negotiations between the economies.
The WTO deals with the international trade between nations. So if India is trading with the US, it has to then follow the disciplines of the WTO. It has to follow the commitments that it has made to the WTO in respect of all other members of the WTO, which is known as the most favored nation treatment. Similarly, the US will also have to abide by its commitments. Then there are disciplines on subsidies, on countervailing measures, on safeguards, on if there is a dispute, then how does a dispute get resolved? So there is an understanding on dispute resolution. So all these are part of the WTO.
The WTO's guiding principles remain the pursuit of open borders, guarantee of the most favored nation principle, non-discriminatory treatment, and a commitment to transparency in the conduct of its activities. However, critics argue that WTO is pursuing an agenda driven by business interests and that its rules undermine the sovereignty of its member states. In recent years, the lack of progress in talks has led some countries to seek trade agreements among smaller groups. Currently, WTO is facing its worst crisis due to hostility by one of its main members, the United States, that could lead to a potential shutdown of the organization in the near future. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And now, 25 years after it was established, the World Trade Organization is in the middle of its worst crisis ever. It's been a few weeks now that its dispute settlement mechanism has been paralyzed, with its judges retiring and the US blocking fresh appointments to the body. The United States has also threatened to block its budget, accusing it of overstepping its mandate, while China, Russia, EU and several other members try to cobble up efforts to save the global trade body. For now, the international trade disputes remains in a limbo.
A stalemate between the US and other members is pushing the World Trade Organization to the verge of collapse. On December 10, 2019, WTO's appellate body effectively stopped functioning as the United States blocked new appointments to the panel, accusing the court of serious overreach. A minimum of 3 judges are needed for the appellate body to fulfill its role as the arbiter of global trade disputes. With 2 judges completing their term on 10th December, the powerful body became dysfunctional. Robert Azevedo, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, said it will take a few months to fix its main body for settling trade disputes.
I think there is no doubt in the minds of anybody's mind that we have compromised the dispute settlement system of the WTO. That doesn't mean that it's over. The dispute settlement mechanism is going to continue. Members are going to continue to solve their disputes through panels. Even the second stage, so an appeal, can happen. Their members are going to continue to resolve their disputes through arbitration.
The biggest challenge of the WTO, I think, there are 2 very important challenges. The first challenge is the WTO has 3 pillars on which it stands. The first one is dispute resolution amongst countries. The second one is negotiating for further market access, further benefits. And the third one is to see, that is the monitoring mechanism, to see if countries are abiding by their commitments. Now, as far as the first is concerned, there is a 2-stage process like our High Court and Supreme Court. So the first stage is the panel process, the second stage is the appellate body. Till the appellate body disposes of an appeal, a case is not finally disposed of. Now, because of the US's attitude in the past 2 years, they have not been allowing the nomination of fresh members to the appellate body, which has 7 members, and any 3 of which are required to hear an appeal. So there is only 1 member left. So the appellate body has become dysfunctional from the 10th of December 2019. So that is a huge, big dent to the credibility of the WTO.
The appellate body has the final say on global trade disputes that cover billions of dollars of international trade, and its decisions are considered to be binding. The current situation also signals the potential demise of the 25-year-old WTO itself, as settling disputes has been its most important function. As the WTO's dispute settlement body, the appellate body has 7 judges with staggered terms. Each judge has a 4-year term and can be reappointed for an additional 4 years. Over the last couple of years, the membership of the appellate body has dwindled to 3 from the required 7. The United States has been blocking reappointment of the WTO's appeals judges since 2017. As a result, the understaffed body has been unable to stick to its 2 to 3 month deadline for appeals filed in the last few years. Due to lack of quorum, if any party in a dispute appeals the initial decision, the dispute remains indefinitely unresolved.
The first thing is that, as I was saying, the dispute settlement mechanism, that has taken a very big dent. So that will need to be put back on the rails, because without that, no country would feel safe and secure, especially the smaller countries, smaller trading nations. The second thing is, on the negotiating front, though the Doha Development Agenda of 2001 was supposed to provide a lot of benefits to developing countries, it could not be finalized. So now the stronger developed countries and trading nations, they are trying to forge trade agreements in specific areas of their choice and interest, like e-commerce, for instance, and fisheries subsidies, for instance. So the developing countries, not many of them may have an interest in these areas. So on the negotiating pillar of the WTO, a lot needs to be done to factor in all the aspirations and aims of a large number of developing countries. That also needs to be built into the agenda. Whether that will get done or not remains to be seen.
However, China and European countries are making efforts to preserve the WTO. The European Union has proposed an interim court to replicate functions performed by the appellate body. Canada and Norway are on board with the plan. China has also offered to work with the majority of World Trade Organization to address the challenges. Russia is also assessing the plan put forth by the EU. The WTO's dispute settlement procedure is seen as vital to smooth international trade, with over 500 international disputes brought to the WTO and over 350 rulings issued since 1995. The current developments put India at a disadvantage and will create a more challenging trade environment for the country. India is already facing a rising number of dispute cases, especially on agricultural products, including sugarcane. There is now great uncertainty over the dispute settlement process. With the appellate body becoming non-functional, countries may be compelled to implement rulings by the panel for lack of appeal. With inputs from Leena Sharma, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Time for a short break on the program. On the other side, we'll tell you about some major cases before the World Trade Organization. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching In Depth. Let's now tell you about some of the major cases ongoing before the WTO. While most of the disputes that reach the appellate body of the WTO involve the United States of America, a few cases also involved India. Our next report talks about some of these important cases.
Since its inception in 1995, the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement system has resolved many trade-related disputes between member states. It received over 500 complaints in which the WTO used both political negotiation and adjudication for dispute resolution. India has been an active participant in the WTO dispute settlement system as complainant in 21 cases and as respondent in 22 cases. Until recently, India was involved in 14 WTO disputes, all of them handled by domestic law firms. Earlier this July, Commerce and Industries Minister Piyush Goyal informed Parliament about these cases that pertain to disputes concerning measures on non-immigrant visas, the importation of certain agricultural products, solar cells and solar modules, iron and steel products, export-related measures, sugar and sugarcane, and tariffs on ICT products, among others. In a dispute against the US that challenged India's key export subsidy schemes, including the one for special economic zones, India suffered a setback last month at the WTO, which ruled these export subsidy programs violated its norms. The dispute panel rejected India's claim that it was exempted from the prohibition on export subsidies under the special and differential treatment provisions of the WTO's Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures. As per the panel recommendations, India needed to withdraw the prohibited subsidies under the EOU, EHTP, BTP schemes, EPCG scheme and MEIS within 120 days. India has filed an appeal against the WTO panel report. Earlier in June, India had won a major trade dispute against the US, with the dispute settlement panel pronouncing that subsidies and mandatory local content requirements instituted by 8 American states breached global trade rules. In a significant 100-page report, the 3-member panel largely upheld India's claims that subsidies and local content requirement in 11 renewable energy programs in 8 US states violated core global trade rules. The panel also asked the US to ensure that these states are in conformity with trade rules. Some of India's ongoing active disputes include DS 430 that relates to import restrictions by India on certain agricultural products, including the poultry and poultry products. The complainant is United States. DS 456 that relates to the domestic content requirements in the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission program of MNRE. DS 436 is all about the exorbitant countervailing duty imposed by the US on certain hot-rolled carbon steel products originating from India.
There was a case against export subsidies which were being given in India. We need forex. So we have to sort of give motivation to our exports. We have to give concessions to our export. We need to give subsidies to our export.
Since WTO's inception, India has joined as third party in over 90 cases of the total 480 cases of the global trade body. With inputs from Vipul Agarwal, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And that's it from us in this edition of In Depth. We'll be back same time tomorrow now with a comprehensive view on some other current subject of significance. In case you missed the television broadcast of our program, remember that you can also watch it online